Hello, this is Haider Ali, and we're looking at Chapter 13 of Principles of Marketing. This question asks, explain what is meant by the terms needs and wants in marketing. Describe how Naomi Klein criticizes marketing in terms of its impact on needs and wants. Describe the impact of conspicuous consumption on society. Assess these criticisms in light of the statement, marketers can influence customer wants, but not their needs. Again, you'll see, as featured in other exam questions, that this one covers a range of course concepts, and it tests those students or distinguishes between those students who've revised across a range of subtopics compared to those who perhaps have focused their research, have focused their revision on very specific parts of the syllabus. Generally, examiners prefer to reward those students who demonstrate a knowledge of a range of different concepts. So the first part of the question, explain what is meant by the terms needs and wants in marketing. Needs are basic human requirements such as hunger, need for shelter and thirst. Wants are the form such needs can take and are influenced by social and cultural factors and marketeers' activities. So, for example, a need can be, say, thirst, which is a general need. It applies to all individuals across all cultures and societies, across different countries, and so on. However, the way in which people satisfy their thirst can vary. Obviously, in some countries, in all countries, people will use water to satisfy their thirst, but there are other ways available as well. For example, in some countries, people may prefer to use bottled mineral water to satisfy their thirst. In addition, as well as water, there are other ways in which people can satisfy thirst. For example, in some countries there can be a tradition or culture of drinking tea. In others it will be coffee. Also you have things like, say, soft drinks and so on. Now the point is that each of these different methods people use to satisfy their thirst is described as a want, and these wants are going to be shaped not only by social and cultural factors, but also by marketers' activities. So in some countries where marketeers have heavily promoted drinking of, say, cola drinks, in those countries you'll find that people will also be drinking cola when they're feeling thirsty. Now, namely, the question asks, describe how Naomi Klein criticizes marketing in terms of its impact on needs and wants. And her argument is that a weakness with marketing, or a criticism of marketing, is it taps into needs and wants no matter how damaging or reckless they may be. So, for example, she talks about sports utility vehicles. Some individuals like to drive cars that give us a sporty image of the driver. They like having cars with, say, four-wheel drive. They like having a seating position which is relatively high so they can see what's around them. Now, those may be the wants that those individuals have. A number of car manufacturers satisfy those wants by producing and selling sports utility vehicles. The problem is that those marketers are perhaps not recognizing the environmental damage that these products can cause. So the issue here is that although marketers may well quite legitimately make profits by identifying customers' wants and delivering to those wants, the problem is that often those individual wants may actually be quite damaging to the rest of society. Also, what Naomi Klein refers to is the idea that marketing takes people's desires and sells them back in an unauthentic form. So her particular example is, say, with Disney's various Disney products, where Disney may be tapping into a want for, say, nostalgia. It may be tapping into a want for experiencing fairy tales and so on, and it sells or addresses these wants in an unauthentic form by creating theme parks which are creations of the company itself that try and satisfy this particular want. So the argument would be that, for example, if somebody wants to experience history, they can go to a real historical site, which is authentic, But alternatively, if they go to a Disney theme park, they are accessing something which is not authentic. And it's the authenticity issue that Naomi Klein is dealing with. The question also asks, describe the impact of conspicuous consumption on society. Here what we're talking about is that conspicuous consumption is justified by some people as a private act, a demonstration of personal freedom. By conspicuous consumption, by the way, we mean where people are buying goods whose ownership they demonstrate in a conspicuous way. So, for example, it could be to do with branded clothing, it could be to do with jewelry, accessories, it could be to do with, say, cars, for example, whose branding is very obvious, and so on. However, conspicuous consumption can have a negative effect on less privileged sections of society, that people who are not so well off may feel alienated when they see everybody else around them buying and using and displaying such products. In addition, the other effect it may have is that people who are not necessarily able to afford such products may borrow money or spend money they don't really have in order to buy the same branded products, in order to take part in a conspicuous consumption society, and it's argued this is damaging to society as a whole. And also the argument runs that if we have societies where people compare themselves to each other in terms of consumer goods and signals of consumption, then this is a weakness of society, because simply having people compare each other in terms of material gain is not something which is particularly meaningful. And this is the radical critique that Naomi Klein has. The images are from Disneyland. On the left, we have a mock-up of a shop, a 19th century American shop, but as you can see, the contents inside are not the contents that you would have in a typical shop of the time. They're actually Disney's own branded products. And similarly, on the right, you have a log cabin, which again is supposed to represent a building drawn from the past, but in this instance, again, it has various Disney souvenirs. So in this, what we have here as the radical critique is that you have needs and wants, which are transformed by marketeers, in this instance Disney, who then create these particular offerings which are sold to consumers in an unauthentic form. The question at the end asks, critically assess these criticisms in light of the statement, marketeers can influence customer wants, but not their needs. This last statement in quotation marks is actually quite an important one, because this quotation highlights a defense of marketing which is sometimes made. What it says is this, that although marketeers, for example, can convince a potential consumer of food to buy a McDonald's hamburger rather than KFC chicken wings, what marketers cannot do is make someone feel hungry. And marketers' argument is that they cannot get consumers to spend money on things they don't necessarily need, because all they can do really is give people a choice that once somebody has a particular want, once somebody is actually hungry, they can offer people a choice as to how to address that hunger. So the point being made by the defenders of marketing is that marketers cannot influence fundamental human needs. However, there is a counter-argument that social needs or self-esteem can be drivers of consumption. That sometimes, even though people may not necessarily need a particular product or service, what may happen is that because people want to satisfy their social needs or their self-esteem needs, they will buy those products or services. So, for example, although somebody doesn't need an expensive watch to tell the time, that a relatively cheap watch could perform that function, they may end up buying a relatively expensive watch because they do not want to be seen by their friends and relatives as being socially inferior. So that's a counter-argument to this.